Morning and welcome. Thank you for joining our next Coffee and Culture session. This is a fortnightly session where we talk about something culture related and have a coffee together. So, thanks to everyone for joining us today. For those that I haven't met previously, I'm Sarah McClellan. I'm a work psychologist. I'm really passionate about culture and shaping happier, healthier, more human cultures. And that's what I do in my work. So I'm an author and founder of Make It Human, a company focused on helping leaders and managers to build the skills, knowledge, and their capabilities around shaping better workplace cultures. The format of the session is that I dive into a topic. Today, it's all about what is a growth culture, and then we open up for some conversation and questions. So normally I talk for around 10 to 15 minutes, and then feel free to add questions to the chat, and then we'll explore those as we go along. So let's dive in. So as I said, our first topic, or our topic today, is really unpacking what is a growth culture. And I wanted to start this conversation by looking at the concept of a growth mindset, which I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with. It's an idea that's been around for quite a long time. I think brought to life by Professor Carol Dweck, a psychologist in the US. And she wanted to examine what is the impact of mindset on how people perform, how they engage, how they feel in their lives, not just in work. And she came up with this concept of we are either engaged in a fixed mindset. So when we think we've reached the limit of our abilities. So, for example, I can't do that, and then stopping. Or we can step into a growth mindset where we more commonly believe, I can't do that, but I can learn how to do that. And notably, she found that when people were in growth mindsets, more positive outcomes materialized. So, both for individuals in terms of lower levels of stress and improved resilience, but also for organizations and individuals in terms of their performance levels. So, if we're able to get into this mindset of, I can learn how to do that, it really has a significant impact on the experiences and outcomes that we can create. She did also say that it isn't necessarily set, so we can move between a fixed and a growth mindset. So it's more of a continuum, although you might have more, like in personality terms, more of a leaning towards one or the other. So perhaps then a better question is, when do you have more of a growth mindset? And actually, in terms of culture, an even better question is, how can we shape an environment for growth? And this is something that I have been exploring over the last few years, really getting into how can we create conditions for growth? How can we help people more often than not step into a growth mindset? Because we know that has positive impacts. And in the work that I've done, so in terms of being a psychologist, working with lots of different organizations around the world, consulting around a variety of people and organizational issues and opportunities, and also as a leader, having led quite large teams and tried to build culture from the ground up, I've really reflected on what are the conditions that we need as humans to be able to feel that we can step into that growth mindset, and essentially how can we shape a growth culture. And this led me to this model, which has 5 elements, and really what I wanted to unpick is, why are there some cultures where people just feel more connected, they feel more empowered, more able to grow and achieve greater things, and why in other cultures does that feel really hard, and why then do things go really wrong, how we move into more toxic behaviors, damaging behaviors. And also, interestingly, why is it that organizations can also shift? So like individuals between fixed and growth mindsets, organizations can also move into different phases and the dynamics change. And an organization that was very healthy and focused on growth for people can enter a new phase where that shifts. And Boeing is an example of that, an organization that has experienced that shift and the tragic consequences. So in my research and through my own experiences, I came up with this model, and I want to talk you through that today, because I think this will give you some practical tools and insights to help look at your own team and organizational cultures and identify steps that you could take. So let me walk you through them. And the first one is around workplace. And this really is about creating the conditions for people to thrive. So it includes things like having flexibility, having opportunity to make your own choices around where you work, how your schedule is constructed. Enabling flex and balance is really at the core. But it's also things like creating a workspace, a physical or virtual environment that people actually want to join and they want to be part of. And running through this, through the veins, you might say, is a real focus on integrity and fairness. We've got to have that embedded at the core so people know this is a place where that really guides how decisions are made. And it's a place where I feel as a human, I could thrive. And why this matters, flexible work leads to an increase in performance, but because we feel more empowered, we've got more choice. We can think more carefully about how we best use our time. And organisations with great work-life balance are more likely to be recognised as great places to work. Having flexibility is something that keeps coming out top in terms of, or in the top 2 or 3, in terms of things that people are looking for in their jobs. And when we don't have this in place, you tend to see things like burnout, stress, busyness, frantic meetings, full calendars, but perhaps less progress on important things and people feeling burnt out and exhausted. So some of those signs are things to look for should this be something that you need to strengthen. The second area is around accountability, and this really is about setting shared expectations on clarity on how people contribute. And organisations tend to be quite good at describing what it is they want people to deliver, so the outputs or the KPIs, but they're less clear, or they tend to be less clear on how work gets done and what good looks like. So this is where you really want to step into creating clear alignment on what, how, and why in how we're approaching our work. So it involves things like embedding a clear purpose, a clear link in terms of the impact that our work has on society, on people, on the environment around us. It involves being clear on the behaviours that you're expecting people to engage in. So not just the outcome or the output that you want them to deliver, but how they get there. Otherwise, it can create a lack of meaning. So people feel disconnected from the tasks that they're performing. And it can also mean that poor behaviours can creep in because there's a lack of shared understanding of essentially what good looks like. So it doesn't really matter how I get there and achieve this output. I may step on other people's toes. I may engage in unethical or even silly behaviours, but I've achieved that outcome. So, I've ticked that box. So those are some of the things to look at in that area. The third area I think is a big one and really important right now because we are in this virtual, remote, hybrid setup for so many organisations right now. And that is around proactively creating and maintaining a community, and a community where people feel we're in this together and we're equally valued. So the ingredients here are around creating psychological safety. So spaces where people feel able to share their ideas, to share their concerns as well, and to have open conversation and to do that constructively. And it takes effort, and it takes ongoing effort to really keep building strong levels of psychological safety. It's also about enabling collaboration and connection. So not just around work itself, but more socially as well. You'll see very strong organisations with effective communities really thinking about how do we build those stronger bonds between people. And some of that involves having specific events or get-togethers, or just simply building time into agendas for some of the more informal conversation that we need as humans to build connection. It's also around creating inclusive environments, building empathy and understanding amongst groups. In our busy lives, it's really easy to step into making assumptions and not taking time to build our understanding of what this means for others. And why this matters, you can see lots of the outputs here, but a lot of it is around reducing stress, increasing well-being, but also for organisations and individuals, increasing agility and innovation. When there is a space where we feel we can connect, we can share, and we can collaborate, it's not rocket science. That's what happens. We share ideas, and we're more innovative. When we don't have this, it can feel like, or it can look like, there's quite a lot of silence. There's not much dialogue. There's a lot of top-down communication. We can feel that there's more silos across the organisation. And perhaps, as I said, there is this lack of empathy, this lack of understanding between individuals and between particular groups. The fourth area is about empowerment, and this really is the sense that people feel they're trusted to do the right thing. And this is so powerful and so impactful. When we feel empowered and able to use autonomy or agency to make our own decisions around things that we know stuff about, then that feels fantastic. It has a really positive impact on engagement, on productivity, and also on things like decision making. So it involves leaders and managers helping people to understand and create space where they can make their own decisions and where they can guide their own work. Obviously, trust is a big driver here, and having two-way, open, transparent conversation and regular communication is a really core feature in this element. When I see organisations struggling with this, you tend to see things like simple decisions being referred up within organisations, so people not feeling empowered to make their own decisions. Things like discretionary effort tends to drop because you become much more dependent on your superiors and don't act until you are asked to or told to. And also it tends to reduce ideas and innovation. So those are some signs that you might want to investigate empowerment. And then finally, element 5 is all about growth. So intentionally creating systems, processes, using data to enable people to feel supported and inspired to develop and grow in their roles and within the organisation. So this really is about creating an environment where people can access development in the day-to-day, in their daily work, creating structures and support so that they can access support and coaching from people like managers or maybe mentors, and having things like feedback really flowing throughout the organisation, as well as focusing on things that enable growth, that enable learning. So there are lots of things you can do in this space to keep strengthening growth as that fifth element. And so many benefits to this. You can see them across the slide here. But I think on the flip side, when we get this wrong, we lose very talented people, we lose high potentials. They tend to get to a point and then decide to exit because they can't see where their career or their opportunities to grow are going to come from. You might see people that are more focused on years service and tenure than gaining different experiences and being able to move around the organization. And also things like you might see the same mistakes being repeated because learning isn't flowing, mistakes are getting buried, and the organization starts to stagnate from that perspective. So those are the 5 elements. And when we bring those together, when we see those really working, what we see happening is essentially what the World Economic Forum described as a workforce sustainability flywheel. So these wheels start to turn. We're able to focus on creating environments where people can grow. They can step into this growth mindset. They feel happier, healthier, more able to thrive. That encourages more positive, effective, inclusive, and collaborative teams. And that turns the wheel in terms of growing, profitable, and durable businesses. And there's a great piece of research that came out last year that explicitly shows the link between higher levels of well-being and financial and stock performance. And that was from Deneve et al. That came out, I think, towards the end of 23, start of 24. So some really powerful data to support getting this right. And what do all of these companies share in common? Probably you can guess from the stories that I've been telling and the model that I've been talking through. All of these organizations, in their own way, are focused on developing growth cultures. And you will be able to see elements or those 5 elements across each of these organizations, but they won't necessarily look exactly the same. They won't look exactly the same because there are different ways you can achieve this. But what they have in common is this focus on these 5 elements and intentional effort being put into shaping culture proactively to create the right conditions for growth. So let me just give you a couple of examples. A lot of it starts with habits that then grow and then spread across the organization. So at Canva, they're very focused on creating a growth focused culture through learning, and they do that through enabling their managers to coach and to spend the majority of their time developing their teams. So they have very clearly created actions and habits around that, and that really shapes their culture very positively. At Timpson, for example, a great example of empowering their store managers, so they all have a budget for resolving issues or essentially keeping customers happy. So rather than having to go through up through chains of authority, they can solve problems or make sure that customers leave feeling happy by using this budget that they have. At Zurich in the UK, they initiated or they made all of their jobs flexible, both in terms of location and hours. So thinking about workplace and creating conditions for people to thrive. And they saw a huge increase in applicants from women, and that's enabled them to employ more women and address the gender balance. They had an issue initially that they wanted to resolve. So there are small ways that you can make quite a big difference by focusing on these 5 elements in a structured way and then taking small steps to shape a positive culture. So thank you for joining, and I will shortly stop the recording and then we'll open up for any questions. But very quickly, next time, so in a couple of weeks' time on the 24th, we're going to get into more practical activities around how you can evaluate your culture. And we also have a new self-diagnostic about to land called the Growth Culture Scorecard. So if you're a member of the Make It Human Club, you'll get to see that very very shortly. It's open to everyone. You can join just by going to our website, and we'll talk about that as well as some quick tools that you can pick up and use to really get under the skin of your culture and objectively see against these 5 areas, where should I focus my attention? How can I keep evolving and improving? Because for all organizations, as I said at the start, culture constantly moves and changes. So we've got to keep focused on these elements and nudging actions and habits towards growth. Thank you for joining. This recording will be on our YouTube channel, so you can always catch up there and watch back previous episodes. Thank you. See you soon.